Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the lark still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amidst the guns below. In his book Der totalen Krieg, German World War I general Erich von Ludendorff idolized warfare as the ultimate test for a society. According to him, in order for society to prove itself worthy of existing, a violent struggle against its neighbors for supremacy was necessary. Ludendorff dreamed of a so-called seelische Geschlossenheit, a spiritual unity of the people. He dreamt of a nation united in the efforts of war on all levels, industrial, political, scientific, and even cultural. The struggle of war was to be fought by the entire people, almost as if he thought of the world as a real-life game of Sid Meier's Civilization. Ludendorff was a National Socialist and would in his later years support Adolf Hitler in his takeover of Germany, and it was upon his ideas that the warring Empire of Japan would build its military doctrine. To Ludendorff, organized violence was not just a means to an end, but an end goal in itself. For fighting would make a people strong, and a strong people would fight.
Violence in the real world is not like it is on film. Obviously, some of you will say, the violence is unrealistic, it defies the laws of physics, and the heroes always seem to survive no matter what the odds. And this is true, but it is not my point. My point is rather that it doesn't matter what incredible and unlikely actions are portrayed on the screen, because the true dread that the violence of war brings can never be put on the screen. Not even the most hardcore, true-to-history battle scenes can portray that. And that is because when the movie ends, so does all the damage done, no matter how horrific. See, the ramification of war is not only the violence in its moment, it is the fear that is put through every heart, be it militarily or civilian. It is the devastated lands that never recover. It is the empty chairs in every family home that once had a living, loving soul in it that is now gone and forever not but a memory. And there is not a single raised monument nor a historical account ever made that could rightfully tell that story for even a single participant in war. Because war is hell. Strange thing is, everyone seems to know that, and yet the violence that comes with conflict is what draws us in. It draws me in too, because I am fascinated by all the theater of violence can show me. In fact, I think I need it. Strangely enough, not despite, but rather because of how terrible the unspeakable truths of violence are. I need to cherish violence, the more spectacular the better, in order to forget about what the true horrors of violence would mean in real life. I'm gonna make a silly example, and roast me if you disagree. Fuck it, I don't care. But the first Star Wars movie was fucking awesome. It had all sorts of cool shit in it, and most of it still holds up to scrutiny today. Like spaceships, robots, lasers, James Earl Jones' sexy voice, all the rad stuff. It's really easy not to think about how there in the movie is an entire planet that just gets wiped out in an act of war. It gets brushed aside, partly by the movie, but I'm convinced that the human brain helped with that. We don't like to think about what the last moments of a child on Alderaan would have been like. I personally would rather just drool over the cool set designs and rad spaceships shooting lasers and making cool sounds, right? I think you would too. And that way of thinking can go a long way when it comes to motivating people. So how the fuck do they do it in real life, huh? Like, Star Wars is one thing to get over, but how is it possible to motivate human beings that it is a good idea to gather in large groups in order to murder each other on a massive scale? Like, wouldn't that idea get shot down as probably the worst fucking idea ever at any time anyone ever wanted to go to war? Well, we still do go to war, so obviously not. But we generally do not like to do so on our own. People generally need to be sold a picture of what war is going to be like, so they can vibe with that in order to participate. And that is why every organizer of a military force ever has to put emphasis on looking as cool as fucking possible. Because you can get away with anything, as long as it looks cool enough.
So in order to make war work with the human mind must be distracted from the bad parts and be made to focus on the good parts. Granted, there are many cases where the struggle for survival is enough to motivate people to make war, but those cases generally go hand in hand with situations where that struggle would be necessary even if people didn't voluntarily go to war. One of the best examples of this in modern history would have to be the resistance of the people in and around the Soviet Union during the German invasion of World War II, where it was quickly made obvious that surrender would only mean death by different means. The Nazis meant to eradicate the people living in those lands, and they made every effort to do so, whether the people resisted in force or not. In situations like that, where civilian lives are massacred indiscriminately to military lives, picking up a rifle and shooting at the enemy needs no further motivation, because it is then simply a continuous fight for survival. But what of the soldiers that don't go to war for their own survival? What keeps them fighting almost as hard as the people with nothing left? And how is it that two humans from different walks of life, neither of them ever bloodthirsty or evil, can find themselves making the effort of their lives to murder the other? The effort to make that happen is not a simple one, and it comes in many flavors. I would argue that essentially it comes down to appealing to our monkey brains. So I'm gonna try and explain this in layman's caveman terms. We crave cohesion, to be part of a group, and so we dress ourselves in cohesive uniforms so that we can recognize that we are amongst friends. We fear and respect the powers of nature, sharp claws, sturdy carapaces, and the mystified uncontrollable forces of thunder and fire. And so, with all the inventions of war, we make ourselves powerful. We make it so that we can conjure noise, smoke, and fire at the tips of our fingers. We create armor to make ourselves feel indestructible, and with claws forged from the earth itself, we can cut through anyone who would challenge us on our immense might. With flags, uniforms, singing, cohesive marching, firebrand speeches from our superiors, displays of power, and with the legendary stories of every one of our ancestors that threw their lives away for war just like we are now, we can be made to forget what war really is about. We are made to think of it as a noble sacrifice, and to die for the cause grants one such veneration that it almost seems appealing to die. With some arranged noises, some pretty colors, and the stories of people we have never met, we can be manipulated into participating in bloody murder. Throw in some peer pressure shaming methods into the mix to alienate everyone not willing to participate and brand them as traitors or cowards, and you got yourself an efficient martial culture. Don't fool yourself into thinking you are immune to this form of manipulation. It's a spell that once cast is not easily broken. The desire to go along with the group is etched in our minds. It is supposed to be an evolutionary trait that keeps us together for safety, for survival, for the good of everyone. However, this instinct can be exploited to march humans en masse to their certain deaths. And it has been done throughout history, again and again and again. And looking back at history, what do we derive from it? I'm gonna need you to help me out with this one. It would seem one can convey almost any message as long as it is dressed up in pretty pictures. Really, it seems to be the overall most effective way to convey any message in the first place. This is not just something that is used for evil, mind you. Almost every work of text has to portray the good guys as cool and awesome and the bad guys as silly, weak, dumb, or scary. Scary. But hold on now. The scary things actually look kind of awesome, don't they? This is why the villains of iconic movies often become mascots of their franchises. This is especially the case with horror movies that often have bigger focus on the villainous characters. But it can generally be found to be true for most franchises because fear seems to strike a chord with us. It makes us remember, and what we remember, we can internalize. In the before times of 2008, the movie The Dark Knight presented to the public a villain which likes it had rarely seen before. The Joker was a card-holding, cynical badass with a bitching purple suit and fucking war paint in his face wherever he went. He looked cool, acted cool, and in the end of the movie he very arguably won. And with the movie receiving grand critical acclaim, making the way for superhero movies to be taken way more seriously as works of art, a lot of people empathized with the man of the hour. The tragic death of its main actor Heath Ledger would, to some, mean an almost religious veneration of the role that he played. The Joker was to be his legacy, and a legacy it certainly was. It became a common opinion that the Joker of The Dark Knight was right. What he said was read as uncomfortable truths that no one from the establishment would dare speak of. A rebel against the ruling order with a message. I am the agent of chaos. You cannot control me. I will do harm. And to a lot of people who were hurt by an establishment of sort, be it on a macro, meso, or micro level, the Joker became an empowering symbol. Just they wait. One day they might provoke you enough for you to show them your inner Joker, right? And then, just like in the movie, they won't be able to defend themselves against you. The Joker became a revenge power fantasy so powerful that some people went and did actual harm in his name. Whatever the creators of The Dark Knight had in mind for their legacy, it wasn't this. I would like to compare this powerful symbol with a similar villain of cinema that came 4 years earlier. A villain that held all the cards, always staying one step ahead of the good guys, killing and maiming to make a point about his cynical view on society. A villain that nobody gives a goddamn shit about anymore. The Saw movies were defining of their era. Gore, spectacle, and horror presented to the public as a mainstream mainstay of the early 2000s horror cinematic experience. These movies were the fucking shit when they came out. Everybody was either grossed out or ecstatic about Saw during its heyday, leading to a near ridiculous amount of sequels, granting its creators a buttload of power to expand on its universe and its storytelling. And for the most part, it seems that they did a good job. Saw sequels was churned out like FNAF games, and people went to see them every time, well, almost every time. So that begs the question why John Kramer, the original Jigsaw killer, couldn't come close to the symbolical power of the Joker. Personally, I believe that this is for two main reasons. The first one being that people were mostly interested in the Saw movies because of its spectacle, the traps, the creative ways to get people to murder each other, and this instead of empowering the message of the villain such as of the violence in The Dark Knight, took away focus from it. And that is because, and here is my second reason, John Kramer just isn't cool. Sure, the Billy puppet is scary and awesome, but it isn't the puppet that conveys the cynical view on society. That speaking part goes to an old man with terminal cancer. And at the end of the day, who will the people gather behind? A mysterious man with cool scars and war paint, or a terminally ill old man? The Joker wins through rule of cool, and 8 movies of developing Jigsaw doesn't mean shit against that. There's this statement I keep hearing in progressive circles of media critique. It is the phrase, "You missed the point by idolizing them." It is used mainly as a comment on fandoms of regressive boys fawning over characters like Tyler Durden, Rorschach from The Watchmen, and of course, the Joker. As symbols of the white man's rage taking revenge on an uncaring world, these characters seem to find their way into the hearts of the people that look with rather uncritical eyes of what they're actually doing. Be it murder, destruction, or disruption of world peace, the idea of idolizing of these characters is done as some sort of misinterpretation of the intentions of the creators. I mentioned earlier the harm done in the name of the Joker, and how nobody who was part of the production team could have intended for that to happen, and I stand by that. But I feel the nagging question is then, what exactly are the intentions of these characters? I'm sure there's artistic intent behind the creation of all characters that ever meant anything to anyone, but how much of a center stage do these intentions take? There is a rabbit hole of death of the author theory to deep dive into here, and how an artist's vision can get misread and distorted by its recipients, but that distortion can only go so far without help. The thing is, the big driving force behind any well-funded project of art is to make those funds back in as big a ratio as possible. That means capitalizing on everything that your work of art gets appreciated for, through merchandising the most remembered characters, making games and spin-offs dedicated to the best parts, and milking your lovely artistic creation down to the last penny. Doing this for character meant to be abhorrent and monstrous will absolutely muddle down the original message of the character in favor of making money. When icons of the villain are made and sold based on its coolness, some people will forget what made that villain a villain in the first place and only remember the cool. And so, a murder is suddenly bad as an admirable. I don't think the companies responsible for this kind of merchandising gives two shits about how people interpret their intellectual property so long as they keep consuming their products. They probably don't want harm done in their name, but that's probably partly because real-world harm is just a bad look. And a bad look means less money. That's the real catch. If at the end your main goal is to make as much money as possible, it will mean doing whatever makes you the most money, which obviously means putting your artistic intent at a distant second place at best. In the third act of The Dark Knight, there's a display of heroism from common people and inmates of a prison where they come together to defy the Joker and refuse to destroy each other. It is probably the most heroic and most beautiful moment in the movie. And from what I can tell, that part of the movie has been completely forgotten. The Joker being cool and awesome overshadowed any heroics the movie could offer. 200 people saving each other's lives by believing in each other's mercy just wasn't cool enough to monetize. And if being good is out of style, then away it goes. It's not only media production where this ideology has gained ground. Think of any social climate where being cool is more important than being good. From the sandbox to the classroom to the political fistfights, image seems to matter more than substance. And because that is the trend, that is what media production panders to. Perhaps that is a pattern a few of you have noticed. Marketable imagery over substance. Got a few of those lately, huh? In 1987, the first edition of Warhammer 40k was released to the public by Games Workshop. It was a tabletop strategy game with science fiction and fantasy elements, and it leaned heavily into satirizing that very genre. Lore-wise, it was the world of an interplanetary dystopia that would give Black Mirror a run for its money. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim, dark future there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. So this was all quite effective satire until it got really popular and made a shitload of money. Then it followed the pattern of exploiting the rule of cool, and somewhere along the way, the common perception of the Imperium of Man started to look almost idyllic to some people. As the bulwark of militaristic zealous manhood against the colorful chaotic other, the alt-right embraced the idea of worshipping a god-emperor and embarking on a violent purge, internalizing the idea of them being the only thing between humanity and utter chaos. Meant as a joke, but over time delivered with less and less tongue-in-cheek, until thankfully Games Workshop realized what was going on, and that having a fascist fanbase was indeed a bad look, and they publicly told them to fuck off. But then, the aesthetics of the Imperium of Man had done its work, serving as an inspiration for the militant extreme right-wing movements that stains the earth today. It obviously wasn't just Warhammer, but the example of Warhammer as an aesthetic that allows for its consumers to forget the horrors of totalitarian militarism isn't not relevant when critiquing media and politics.
So, what do we derive from this? Is violent media going to brainwash us into becoming murderous foot soldiers of a rotten ideology? Will video games melt your brain? Or is it that it's a problem that our culture is so centered around making money that corporations will exploit anything that comes their way, morality be damned, just to grow even more powerful and dominant in society while remaining an utterly arbitrary force catering to whatever political whims may be trending, be it virtuous or monstrous? Nah, I'm sure it's fine.